My name is Rachel, and I've always believed that family comes first, until mine showed me just how wrong I was. For years, I worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet. My parents, Linda and George, weren't exactly rich, but they always dreamed of owning a bigger home, something they could show off to their friends. I loved them, so when I finally got a good-paying job as a project manager in New York, I decided to make that dream come true. I told them, Mom, Dad, I'll help you buy that house you've always wanted. Their eyes lit up like children on Christmas morning. I paid the down payment, handled the mortgage setup, and even furnished the entire place with my own savings. I wanted them to feel comfortable, proud, and safe. But I made one huge mistake. I put the house in their names. I trusted them completely. At first, they were grateful. My mom cried, hugged me, and said, "You're the best daughter anyone could ask for." But that didn't last long. Within months, they started acting like I owed them something. They'd host friends over every weekend, showing off the furniture I paid for, talking about how hard work finally paid off. Not once did they mention me. I ignored it. I thought, let them have this. They deserve happiness. But then, last Friday, I saw something on Facebook that shattered everything. A post from my cousin read, "Can't wait for Uncle George and Aunt Linda's grand housewarming party this weekend." I stared at my phone. Housewarming party? No one had told me a thing. I texted Mom, "Hey, what's this about a housewarming party?" No reply. So I drove over the next day anyway. I wasn't going to let this slide. When I got there, the driveway was packed with cars. Music and laughter poured out through the open windows. I could smell barbecue and champagne in the air. I walked in without knocking. Heads turned. People stopped talking. My mom froze, holding a glass of wine mid-air. Then I heard my dad's voice booming from the living room. "She paid, but we own it now." Everyone laughed. My chest tightened, my ears rang. The humiliation burned so deep, I thought I'd explode. I wanted to scream, to throw everything they'd ever given me back in their faces. But instead, I smiled, just a little, because in that moment, I realized they didn't know the truth. They thought I had signed everything over to them. They thought they owned it. But I never did. I still had the final legal hold on the mortgage, and the property taxes were under my name. So I waited, quietly. I didn't argue, didn't cause a scene. I just looked around the room, memorizing every smug face laughing at me. Then I said softly, "Enjoy your party while it lasts." And I walked out. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. My heart was still pounding from last night's humiliation. I couldn't believe my own parents, people had trusted all my life, would treat me like some stranger who didn't matter. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, and stared at the legal papers spread before me. Every document, every clause, every signature was mine. The house title? Still under my mortgage. The utilities? My accounts. The insurance policy? Also in my name. I had built that home for them, but technically it still belonged to me. So I called my lawyer, Mr. Peterson, a calm, older man who had seen every kind of family drama possible. "Rachel," he said, after listening to my story, "if they're publicly claiming ownership and excluding you, you have every right to take back control. We can send an official notice and revoke their right to occupy the property." I paused. That sounded harsh, like something you do to strangers, not your parents. But then I remembered my mother's smirk, my father's voice echoing, "She paid, but we own it now," and the laughter that followed. No, this wasn't about revenge. This was about respect. I said, "Do it." He promised to start the paperwork immediately. But before the legal part kicked in, I wanted to make something crystal clear to my parents, in person. So I drove back to the house that morning. The driveway was still messy from last night's party, beer bottles, crushed cups, a broken garden light. As I walked up the steps, I heard them inside laughing again, probably bragging about how successful their party was. I knocked. Hard. My mom opened the door, surprised. "Rachel, what are you doing here?" "I came to talk. Can I come in?" She hesitated. "Now's not a good time. We're still cleaning up." But I pushed past her and stepped inside. Dad looked up from the couch, irritated. "If you came to apologize for last night's scene, don't bother." I turned to him slowly. "Apologize? For walking into my own house?" He frowned. "It's our house now. You gave it to us." I smiled slightly. "Did I? Can you show me the paperwork that says that?" They exchanged a confused glance. I reached into my bag, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the table. "This is the mortgage agreement, the insurance, the property tax documentation, and the ownership certificate. You'll notice something interesting. All of it's still under my name." Mom's voice shook. "You said it was ours." "I said it was for you. But that doesn't mean you get to cut me out, humiliate me, or claim ownership that doesn't exist." Dad stood up, angry now. "You can't just throw us out. We've built our life here." I took a deep breath, steady but cold. "I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you a choice. Either treat me like family, with respect and honesty, or I'll have my lawyer evict you by the end of the week." The room went silent. Mom started to cry. Dad looked stunned, unable to process that the little girl who used to beg for his approval was now standing up to him. "You think you're teaching us a lesson?" he said bitterly. "No. I'm teaching myself one. That love doesn't mean letting people walk all over you." I turned and walked toward the door, but before leaving, I stopped and added, "Oh, and one more thing. Since the bills are under my name, I've already disconnected the electricity and Wi-Fi. Consider it a small reminder of who actually runs this house." Their faces went pale. When I got to my car, I sat there for a moment shaking, not from fear, but from release. Years of built-up frustration, guilt, and emotional manipulation seemed to fade away with each breath. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my dad. "We're sorry, Rachel. We went too far. Please come back tomorrow. We need to talk." I didn't reply. Not right away. I needed time. For once, I wanted them to understand the silence they had forced on me for years. The next morning, I got another message, this time from my lawyer. "Dave signed the agreement. They're transferring full control back to you." I stared at the text in disbelief. They actually did it. Later that day, I went over again. The house looked different, not because of anything physical, but because the energy had shifted. They were quieter, humbler. Mom came up to me first, eyes red. "We're sorry for embarrassing you, honey. We thought if we showed people we owned it, they'd respect us more." I sighed. Respect doesn't come from pretending. It comes from being grateful. Dad nodded, his voice low. "You don't have to forgive us, but please don't take the house away. We'll treat it like it should have been treated, from day one." I looked around the living room. This house was supposed to be a symbol of love, not greed. Maybe it could still be that. So I made a decision. "I'm not taking it away," I said softly. "But from now on, things will be different. I'll own it officially, and you'll live here under an agreement. No more pretending." They agreed instantly. As I left that day, I felt something lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not because I won, but because I stood up for myself. And that was the little surprise they never saw coming. A week passed after that confrontation. The house had gone quiet. My parents barely spoke to me, and for the first time, I wasn't rushing to fix everything. I let the silence do its job. Sometimes, silence teaches louder lessons than anger ever could. Still, part of me felt hollow. I had always been the peacekeeper, the daughter who tried to make everyone happy, even at her own expense. And now that I had finally stood up for myself, I didn't know how to feel. Proud? Lonely? Maybe both. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, I got a call from my younger brother, Ethan. He lived out of state and rarely got involved in family drama, but I could tell from his voice that he'd heard everything. "Rachel," he said, "Mom's been calling me nonstop. She's freaking out. What happened?" I sighed. They threw a party in the house I paid for, told everyone they owned it, and laughed at me. I just showed them the truth. Ethan whistled softly. "Wow, I always knew they could be manipulative, but that's next level." We talked for an hour. For the first time in years, he actually sided with me. "You did the right thing," he said before hanging up. "Maybe now they'll understand you're not their safety net anymore." That night, I lay awake thinking about those words. Safety net. That's exactly what I'd been. Whenever they made mistakes, financial or emotional, I was always there to catch them. But who was there to catch me? 2 days later, I decided to visit the house again. Not to argue, but to see what had changed. When I arrived, my dad was mowing the lawn, something he hadn't done himself in years. My mom was sitting on the porch, knitting quietly. The sight was almost surreal. She looked up, surprised. "Rachel, you came." "I just wanted to see how things are going," I said softly. Dad turned off the mower and walked over. "We've been thinking about what you said," he admitted. "You were right. We took your kindness for granted." I nodded, not ready to forgive yet, but willing to listen. Then, Mom did something unexpected. She handed me an envelope. Inside were receipts and documents. "What's this?" I asked. "Our contribution," she said. "We sold some jewelry and Dad's old truck. We want to start paying you back little by little. It might not be much, but it's honest." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The same parents who once bragged about owning the house were now humbly offering to pay me back. "Mom, you don't have to do this." "Yes, we do," she said firmly. "We want to feel proud again, but this time for the right reasons." Something shifted inside me then. The anger that had kept me alive for days slowly began to melt. We sat on the porch together for a long time without saying much, just breathing. For the first time in years, the silence between us didn't feel heavy. It felt healing. But peace, as I'd learned, never lasts forever. A few days later, I got an unexpected knock on my apartment door. It was a middle-aged man in a suit. "Miss Rachel?" "Yes?" "I'm from the county office. Your parents filed a petition to transfer partial ownership of the property." I froze. "What?" He handed me the papers. Sure enough, my parents had tried to claim shared ownership of the house again, despite everything they'd said. For a few seconds, I just stared at the document, unable to process it. Then the disbelief turned into a cold, heavy anger. So this was their new game. Pretend to apologize, gain sympathy, and then stab me in the back legally. I thanked the officer and closed the door quietly. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone and called Ethan. "They're doing it again. They're trying to take the house." He swore under his breath. "Rachel, this is insane. Do you want me to come down there?" "No," I said. "I'll handle it. This time, I'll make sure they can never manipulate me again." That night, I opened my laptop and began preparing my next move. I had proof of everything: texts, calls, even a recording from the night of the party, where my dad said, "She paid, but we own it now." It was time to use it. I wasn't going to fight them out of spite. I was going to protect myself. And maybe, just maybe, teach them what real accountability looks like. The next morning, I went to see my lawyer again. Mr. Peterson raised an eyebrow as I showed him the new petition. They really don't give up, do they? No, I said bitterly, but neither do I. He smiled faintly. Then let's make sure they never get another chance. We drafted a counterclaim, one that would legally reaffirm sole ownership under my name and bar any future attempts to challenge it. Once that was filed, not even they could touch the house. But I asked him for something else. Can we arrange a formal mediation? I want them to hear everything, face to face. He nodded. That's unusual after filing, but possible. I wanted this, not just to win, but to finally say everything I'd held inside for years. A week later, the meeting was set. We sat around a long conference table. Me, my parents, Mr. Peterson, and their attorney. The tension was thick. My dad tried to speak first, but I raised a hand. Please let me talk. I looked them both in the eyes and said, all my life, I wanted your approval. I wanted to make you proud. That's why I bought the house. But you didn't see love. You saw opportunity. And when you shut me out, laughed at me, you showed me exactly where I stood. Mom looked down, tears forming. Dad said nothing. I don't hate you, I continued, but I won't let you control me anymore. This house, it's mine. Not because I want to punish you, but because I earned it. And from now on, I'm living for myself, not your expectations. The room was silent. Even their attorney seemed moved. Finally, Dad sighed. You're right, Rachel. Maybe we don't deserve the house. Or you. For the first time, those words didn't sting. They healed. After that tense mediation meeting, I thought everything would finally calm down. For a few weeks, it did. My parents didn't contact me, didn't visit, didn't even comment on social media. It was peaceful. Lonely, yes, but peaceful. Then, one evening, as I was coming home from work, I noticed something strange. There was an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No return address. Inside was a short handwritten note. You think you've won, but you'll regret crossing your own family. My blood ran cold. The handwriting, it was my dad's. For a few seconds, I stood frozen, staring at the paper, my heart pounding. Then anger slowly replaced fear. I grabbed my phone and called him immediately. Dad, what is this? There was a pause on the line, then his voice came through, calm but cold. You embarrassed us, Rachel. You made us look like fools in front of everyone. I just wanted you to understand how that feels. I took a deep breath. Threats won't fix anything. You're only proving my point. He hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. The shadows in my apartment felt heavier. I wasn't scared of him physically, but emotionally, I was drained. This constant cycle of manipulation, guilt, and control, it had to stop. So, the next morning, I decided to take control in a way they could never undo. I drove straight to the county courthouse and finalized the property protection order my lawyer had prepared. That meant my parents could live in the house only under my written permission. Any attempt to transfer or alter ownership would be legally invalid, and if they tried anything again, the property could be repossessed immediately. The clerk stamped the papers, and I felt something shift inside me, like I was finally cutting the last invisible thread they'd been pulling for years. Later that day, I got a text from Ethan. Heard about the courthouse. Proud of you. But you okay? I texted back, yeah, just tired, but this time it's a good kind of tired. He replied, you should come stay with me for a while. Clear your head. I smiled at the thought. Maybe I would. But before I could plan anything, my phone buzzed again. This time, a call from my mom. Her voice trembled. "Rachel, your father's been taken to the hospital. Chest pain. It's serious." My stomach dropped. Despite everything, he was still my dad. I drove faster than I ever had before. When I reached the hospital, Mom was sitting in the waiting room, her hands shaking. She said, "He's stable now," she said, tears in her eyes. "The doctors said it was stress." I sat down beside her quietly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "I didn't know he sent you that letter. He told me after you called. I yelled at him for it." Her voice broke. "He's stubborn, Rachel. Always has been. But he loves you. He just doesn't know how to show it." I swallowed hard. "Love doesn't look like threats, Mom." She nodded slowly. "I know, but maybe now he'll finally learn." When Dad woke up, I walked into his hospital room. He looked frail, older than I remembered. He tried to smile weakly. "Guess I scared ya, huh?" I said softly. "Not as much as you scared yourself." He chuckled bitterly, then coughed. "You always were tougher than me." We talked for a while. For the first time, he didn't defend himself. He didn't blame me or twist my words. He just listened. "I pushed too hard," he admitted finally. "I wanted people to see me as successful. When you bought that house, I saw it as my chance to prove I'd made something of myself. But I forgot who made it possible. You. You did everything. And instead of saying thank you, I made you feel small." I felt a lump in my throat. "You can't undo what's happened, Dad. But you can stop pretending. Start over." He nodded. "If you'll let me." I hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. One step at a time. Over the next few weeks, things slowly began to shift. My parents didn't magically change overnight, but they were trying. They invited me over, not for a party, but for dinner. Just the three of us. When I walked into the house this time, there was no laughter at my expense, no fake bragging, just a quiet table, candles, and home-cooked food. Mom smiled shyly. We thought we'd start small. No guests, no noise, just family. It felt strange, but good. Over dinner, Dad cleared his throat. He said, "We're thinking of moving out, to a smaller place, one we can afford. We want you to take the house. It's yours in every way." I froze. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, we do," Mom said softly. "We realized the house became a symbol of everything wrong between us. Maybe it's time to let it be your fresh start." That night, as I stood outside watching the sunset hit the house's windows, I realized they were right. The house wasn't just a building, it was a mirror. It reflected every wound, every secret, every broken promise between us. And now it was time for healing. A month later, they officially transferred occupancy back to me and moved to a smaller home nearby. We still saw each other, but things were different, healthier, more honest. One afternoon, while packing some of their old boxes, I found something that made me stop. It was a photograph. Me at age 10, standing in front of our old house, holding my dad's hand. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, "Someday she'll build something bigger than both of us." I smiled through tears. He'd been right. But what I built wasn't just a house. It was a life. Stronger, wiser, and finally free. And that was the real surprise they never expected. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. The house, the one that once represented betrayal and anger, was now my sanctuary. Quiet, peaceful, filled only with what I chose to keep. I'd repainted the walls a warm cream, replaced the old family portraits with my own photos. Mountain trips, sunsets, little moments that made me feel alive again. I had even turned my father's old study into an art room. Funny, I had never painted before, but something about splashing color on a blank canvas made me feel free. My parents had moved into a smaller cottage just 10 minutes away. We talked occasionally, met for coffee once a week. No more drama, no more manipulation, just calm, polite conversation. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Ethan visited often too. He'd bring pizza and sit on the floor, teasing me about how domesticated I'd become. "You know," he said one evening, "I used to think you were too nice for your own good, but now you've turned into a force." I laughed. Maybe being broken was what I needed to learn strength. He smiled. "Nah, you were always strong. You just forgot." A few weeks later, I got an unexpected email from my company's headquarters. It said, "Rachel, we're opening a new branch in Seattle, and we'd love for you to lead the project." Seattle. A fresh start. A new city. A new life. For a long time, I stared at the screen. Leaving would mean truly moving on, from the house, from the memories, from everything that had defined my pain. But it also meant leaving behind the version of me that was always the daughter who saved everyone else. I smiled to myself and typed back, "I'm in." When I told my parents, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mom was the first to speak. "Seattle? That's far." "I know," I said gently, "but I think it's time." Dad cleared his throat. "We're proud of you, Rachel. We might not have shown it before, but we are." That simple sentence, "we're proud of you," was something I'd waited 30 years to hear. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means more than you know." Over the next few weeks, I prepared to move. Packing up the house was emotional. Every room carried a story, some painful, some beautiful. As I walked through the empty living room for the last time, my eyes fell on a small wooden box on the shelf. I didn't remember leaving it there. Inside, I found a note. It was from my mother. "Rachel, we wanted to leave this behind for you. Inside are the keys to the house. It's yours, forever. No conditions, no paperwork, no guilt. You gave us a home when we didn't deserve it. Now we're giving it back the right way. Love, Mom and Dad." There were 2 small silver keys inside, tied together with a blue ribbon. I held them in my hand, smiling through tears. This time, it wasn't about property or pride. It was about closure. A week later, I boarded my flight to Seattle. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window and watched the city shrink below me. I wasn't running away. I was rising above. When I landed, I rented a small apartment overlooking the water. My new job was demanding, but I loved every second of it. Leading a team, making decisions, trusting my instincts, it felt like every lesson I'd learned from my family's chaos had prepared me for this moment. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit by the window with a cup of coffee and think about everything that had happened: the betrayal, the heartbreak, the reconciliation. And every time I'd come to the same realization, I didn't lose a family. I found myself. 3 months into my new life, I received a package in the mail. No return address again, but this time I recognized the handwriting. My dad's. Inside was a small framed picture, the one I had found months ago, of me holding his hand as a little girl. But this time, he had written something new on the back. "I was wrong to think you built something bigger than us. You built something within us. Because of you, we're learning how to love again." I pressed the frame against my chest and whispered, "Maybe that's all I ever wanted." A few weeks later, on a sunny Sunday morning, I got a call from Mom. She was laughing, a sound I hadn't heard in years. "Your father's trying to plant tomatoes again," she said between giggles. "He insists they'll grow better this time." I laughed too. Tell him I'll come visit soon and I'll bring real fertilizer this time. Promise? She asked. Promise, I said. As I hung up, I realized something beautiful. Forgiveness hadn't made me weak, it had made me free. That night, I stood on my apartment balcony, looking out over the city lights. The cool breeze brushed against my skin, and I thought of the long road that had brought me here, from the moment I walked into that party to this exact second. The pain had been real. The betrayal had cut deep. But the person I became because of it, strong, calm, self-assured, was worth every scar. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't living for anyone else's approval. I was living for me. That was the real ending of my story. Not revenge, not regret, but rebirth. The next morning, the sun hadn't even fully risen when I woke up. My phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages, missed calls, even voicemails from my mom. I didn't open a single one. Last night had been chaos. After I told everyone that the house legally belonged to me, people started whispering, questioning my parents. The music stopped, the fake smiles disappeared. I walked out with quiet dignity, but I knew the real storm was yet to come. When I finally opened my phone, one message stood out. Rachel, please don't do this. We can talk. Talk? After what they did? After they humiliated me in front of their friends? No, this time I was done talking. I decided to visit the house again, not to argue, but to act. When I got there, the driveway was empty except for my dad's truck. I walked straight to the front door and rang the bell. My mom opened it, eyes red from crying. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the weight of guilt had finally settled on her shoulders. Rachel, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just wanted to feel proud. By pretending I don't exist? I asked coldly. She lowered her eyes. Your father got carried away. You know how he is. Oh, I know. He's always been the king of excuses. My dad appeared behind her, his jaw tight. Don't talk to your mother like that. You embarrassed us last night. I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. You embarrassed yourself, Dad. You threw a party in a house you don't even own. He stepped closer, his face red with anger. You think you can take this away from us after everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me? I echoed. You didn't raise me to love. You raised me to obey. You wanted control, but that ends today. Then I handed them a folder. Inside were printed copies of the mortgage statements, property tax records, and the letter I had sent to the bank that morning, requesting immediate foreclosure proceedings. My dad's eyes went wide. You wouldn't dare. Oh, I would, because I already did. My mom gasped. Rachel, no, please, we'll lose everything. I took a deep breath. For a second, I almost felt pity. But then I saw my dad standing behind her, shaking his head, still full of pride and denial. I can forgive you, I said quietly, but I can't trust you. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving them behind in silence. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The weight was gone. The guilt, the shame, the need to be loved by people who only valued appearances, all of it disappeared. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because later that night, I got an email from my lawyer. Apparently, my parents had hired their own attorney and were trying to contest ownership of the house. They were claiming I manipulated them into signing documents they didn't understand. That's when I realized something chilling. They weren't just sorry, they were desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. So I poured myself a glass of wine, stared out the window, and whispered to myself, if they want war, I'll give them one. The next few weeks felt like a war, fought with paper and pride. Every morning, I'd wake up to new emails from my lawyer. documents, hearings, claims, and counterclaims. My parents had gone all in. They accused me of manipulation, emotional abuse, even fraud. At first, I was angry. Then I was heartbroken. And finally, I was numb. But I wasn't stupid. I knew the truth was on my side. The mortgage, the payments, the taxes, everything had my name on it. Every single penny came from my bank account. When the day of the court hearing arrived, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my black blazer. My reflection looked calm, but inside, my stomach was tight with nerves. I wasn't facing strangers. I was facing the people who raised me. At the courthouse, my parents sat across from me, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. My mom's hands were shaking. My dad's eyes were hollow, stripped of arrogance. But when he saw me, he tried to smirk, the same pride that had ruined everything still clinging to him. The judge entered and the room fell silent. My lawyer presented the documents, every payment, every transfer, every text where my parents had thanked me for buying the house. Then came their lawyers spinning stories about family promises and verbal gifts. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, my hands trembling slightly. Your Honor, I didn't buy that house to own it. I bought it to give my parents happiness. But they took that gift and used it to humiliate me. I wasn't invited to their party. I wasn't even acknowledged. They told everyone I was nothing but a wallet. And when I reminded them the truth, they tried to erase me again through lies and lawsuits. The courtroom was silent. My mom wiped her eyes. My dad stared down at the floor. The judge nodded slowly, flipping through the documents. Then he looked up and said the words that changed everything. Based on the evidence, the property ownership and payments clearly belong to the plaintiff, Ms. Rachel Bennett. The court recognizes her as the sole legal owner of the house. It was over. My parents lost the case. The house was legally mine. But as I walked out of the courthouse, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Winning against your own parents isn't something to celebrate. It's something you mourn. A week later, I went back to the house one last time. It was empty now. No furniture, no laughter, no fake smiles. Just echoes. I walked through the living room, the same place where I had been humiliated, and sat down on the bare floor. My phone buzzed. A message from my mom. We're leaving town. We're sorry for everything. Take care of yourself. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back. I forgive you, but we can't go back. I hit send, closed my eyes, and let the tears fall. Quietly, freely. A few months later, I sold the house. I didn't need it anymore. With the money, I bought a small lakeside cabin in Vermont. Peaceful, quiet, surrounded by pine trees and water. I started writing again, something I hadn't since college. I wrote about family, trust, and the strange pain of loving people who hurt you. One evening, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, I looked at the sunset reflecting off the lake. For the first time, I didn't feel angry or broken. I felt free. Because sometimes walking away isn't losing, it's finally choosing yourself. And that was the moment I realized I didn't lose my parents that day. I just found me.